I came to the Chase Bank branch on Madison Avenue to close my corporate account, but the banker's face drained of all color. He stared at his monitor, looked up at me, and whispered, "Ma'am, have you seen the current balance on this account?" There was $65 million staring back at him. I had never seen that many zeros in my entire life. "My name is Valerie. I'm 29 years old. And less than an hour ago, my own mother threw me out of our family's Upper East Side penthouse like literal garbage because my husband got my younger sister pregnant. They thought I was walking away with nothing but a battered cardboard box." Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family who underestimated your worth. The cardboard box in my hands felt incredibly heavy, even though it only contained a few framed sketches of neural networks, my favorite ceramic coffee mug, and my scratched MIT alumni laptop. I stood frozen in the center of the double-height living room, a pristine, minimalist masterpiece that I had meticulously curated over the last 5 years of my marriage. I remembered picking out the custom Italian velvet sectional, choosing the exact shade of muted charcoal for the accent wall, and building a life I thought was bulletproof. Across from me stood my husband, Pierce. His arm was wrapped tightly possessively around the waist of another woman. That woman was Chloe, my 24-year-old sister. I stared at his manicured hand resting casually on her hip, my brain flatly refusing to process the visual data. This was the man who had sworn an oath to protect me. This was the sister I had protected from the world. Now they stood united against me, wearing matching expressions of smug, unbothered satisfaction. The air in the penthouse was suffocatingly heavy. I could hear the faint, low hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator in the open-concept kitchen, a mundane, wealthy sound that seemed to mock the absolute instantaneous destruction of my reality. My mother Eleanor stood directly behind the Calicotta marble kitchen island. She didn't look at me with an ounce of sympathy, regret, or maternal warmth. Instead, she glared at me with the same cold, calculating disappointment she had directed my way since I was a teenager. She picked up a thick, heavyweight manila folder and slid it across the smooth marble surface. The heavy thud of this paper echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Sign them, Valerie," my mother commanded, her voice sharp, pointing a perfectly manicured, diamond-ringed finger at the divorce papers. "We are doing this quickly, quietly, and today. Chloe is pregnant. Pierce needs a real wife who can actually navigate high society and give him a family legacy, not an MIT dropout who plays with useless artificial intelligence codes in a dark closet all day." The words hit me like physical blows to the solar plexus. Chloe is pregnant. My younger sister was carrying my husband's child. I looked at Chloe, the undeniable golden child of our family. Growing up in our elite, old-money social circle, Chloe was the teenage model, the Instagram influencer, the girl who did everything right according to my mother's strict, superficial standards. She was the one who got the lavish Sweet 16 galas and the endless Chanel bags. I was the quiet one, the nerd who preferred analyzing supply chain data and teaching myself machine learning. When I dropped out of my master's program at MIT to pursue my independent logistics optimization algorithm full-time, my mother had declared me a lost cause. She had never forgiven me for choosing a non-traditional tech path over a safe corporate ladder. Now she was literally replacing me with the daughter she always preferred. Chloe had always taken what was mine. In high school, it was my friends. In college, it was the attention of our parents. And now in adulthood, it was my marriage. Eleanor had always enabled this sociopathic behavior, telling me I needed to share, that I needed to be the bigger person, because Chloe was younger and more sensitive. The reality was that Chloe was a manipulative opportunist, and my mother was her ultimate enabler. Seeing them standing in my kitchen, effectively stealing my entire life, felt like the tragic but inevitable culmination of 29 years of toxic family dynamics. "Mom," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to steady it. "How can you stand there and support this? She is my sister. He is my husband." Eleanor crossed her arms, her posture rigid and completely unforgiving. "Oh, please grow up, Valerie. Pierce deserves a woman who is actually present in this lifestyle. You have spent the last 3 years locked in that dark room, staring at a screen, working on some ridiculous failed algorithm that went absolutely nowhere. Chloe is offering him a real future. You should be apologizing to him for wasting 5 years of his life." Pierce finally spoke up, his voice dripping with Wall Street condescension. "Listen to your mother, Val. It's over. You need to leave today. This penthouse is under my LLC anyway. You know the legalities." He stepped forward, holding out an open palm. "Hand over the keys to the Porsche Macan. I paid the down payment, and I am not letting you drive off in my asset. I need it for Chloe and the baby. They require a safe, reliable luxury vehicle." I stared at the man I had shared a bed with cooked meals for and loved with all my heart. He was looking at me like I was a squatter who had overstayed her welcome. My hands shook as I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the key fob, and dropped it onto the kitchen island. It hit the marble with a sharp, echoing clatter. "How am I supposed to get anywhere?" I asked, fighting back hot tears. "Where am I supposed to go?" Pierce scoffed, a cruel, mocking smirk playing on his lips. "That's not my problem, Val. You have your own bank account. There is exactly $400 in there. I checked this morning before I legally transferred the rest of our joint funds into my private account. $400 is more than enough for a Greyhound bus ticket and a motel out in Queens. You can figure the rest out yourself. You're supposed to be the smart one, right?" Pierce's laughter echoed through the cavernous penthouse, a harsh metallic sound that cut straight through my chest and left me breathless. 3 years, Valerie," he sneered, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke suit jacket as he stepped closer to Chloe. "You spent 3 entire years ignoring me, ignoring this marriage building, that stupid logistics optimization code. You swore it was going to change the industry. You swore it was going to make millions and revolutionize supply chains. And what happened? Nothing. It was a complete and utter commercial failure. Not a single venture capital firm wanted your little academic project. Valerie, you are a total failure as a developer, and you are an even bigger failure as a wife." The mention of my AI algorithm felt like a serrated knife twisting deeply into my gut. I had poured my absolute soul into that code. It was designed to predict global supply chain bottlenecks and optimize cargo routing in real time, helping independent distributors bypass predatory corporate monopolies. I had worked through countless weekends, skipped holidays, and drained every ounce of my physical and mental energy trying to perfect every single line of code in that system. When I finally launched the beta version, the market response had been completely abysmal. No clients signed up, no traffic came. Pierce had never let me forget that failure, using it as constant daily proof that I should have listened to my mother's state at MIT, or taken a normal corporate job where I could be supervised. He had deliberately used my passion as a psychological weapon to make me feel small and incompetent and entirely dependent on his income. He wanted me to believe that without his financial salvation, I was nothing more than a broke dropout playing with expensive toys. Chloe leaned her head against Pierce's shoulder, letting out a soft, theatrical sigh that made my stomach turn. She began slowly rubbing her completely flat stomach, her oversized engagement ring catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Just sign the papers, Val. Stop making this so incredibly difficult for everyone involved. Pierce and I want to start decorating the nursery next week, and your negative energy is honestly really bad for the baby. Mom says stress is terrible for the first trimester, and you are just dragging this out because you cannot accept that Pierce chose me over you." I looked at the 3 of them standing there, my mother, my sister, my husband. They had formed a perfectly synchronized united front of betrayal, a cold triangle of calculated cruelty designed to break my spirit completely. They wanted me to scream. They wanted me to cry, to beg for mercy, and to throw a tantrum. They desperately wanted the psychological satisfaction of watching me fall apart on the floor in front of them, so they could retroactively justify their horrific actions to their social circle. They wanted to cast me as the crazy, unstable ex-wife, so they could play the role of the happy new family without carrying an ounce of guilt. I realized in that exact crystal-clear moment that I had spent my entire life trying to earn the love and respect of people who were fundamentally biologically incapable of loving anyone but themselves. They didn't value intelligence, loyalty, or hard work. They only valued status control and image. Carefully, I set my cardboard box down onto the polished hardwood floor. I walked over to the marble kitchen island, picked up the heavy Mont Blanc pen lying next to the divorce papers, and flipped directly to the very last page. I didn't read the terms. I didn't care about the division of assets, the spousal support waivers, or the convoluted legal jargon that Pierce's high-priced lawyers had undoubtedly skewed heavily in his favor. At this point, I just wanted to sever myself from these monsters as quickly and cleanly as possible. I signed my name with a completely steady hand, pressing the pen down so hard it nearly tore through the thick, textured paper. I pushed the documents back toward my mother, maintaining direct, unblinking eye contact with her. "Keep the penthouse," I said, my voice eerily calm, completely devoid of the weeping emotion they so desperately wanted to see. "Keep the Porsche. Keep him Chloe. You all deserve exactly what you are going to get." I picked up my cardboard box, turned my back on the people who had spent years destroying my self-worth, and walked out the front door without looking back. The afternoon Manhattan sun was blinding as I stepped out onto the bustling sidewalk of East 72nd Street. The city was loud, chaotic, and completely oblivious to the domestic nightmare that had just unfolded inside the manicured walls of my former home. I pulled out my phone and ordered a basic Uber rideshare with the very last 5% of my battery life. I stood near the curb, clutching my meager belongings against my chest, waiting for a stranger to drive me away from the only life I had known for the past 5 years. When the car pulled up, I climbed into the back seat. The driver asked me how my day was going in a cheerful, routine tone. I couldn't answer. I just stared out the window, completely numb, stripped of my dignity, my marriage, and my family in a single afternoon. The vinyl seat of the rideshare felt freezing cold against my legs. I watched the familiar, wealthy streets of the Upper East Side roll by the perfectly trimmed boutique entryways and luxury SUVs, sitting in front of pre-war buildings feeling like an alien that had been violently expelled from a planet I had tried so hard to inhabit. For 5 years, I had played the role of the supportive, quiet wife. I had cooked gourmet dinners, managed the household logistics, and tried to be the perfect partner Pierce claimed he wanted for his corporate image. I had tolerated his passive-aggressive comments about my lack of income and ignored the increasingly frequent late nights he claimed to be working at the hedge fund. I had been so blindly focused on making my marriage succeed and proving my mother wrong that I had completely missed the affair happening right under my nose. The betrayal was an absolute physical weight on my chest, making it difficult to draw a full breath. I opened my bank app on my phone one last time to confirm the devastating reality. $400. That was the sum total of my net worth after a lifetime of trying to do the right thing. My heart pounded heavily in my chest as the car sped down Madison Avenue. I needed to cut every single remaining tie to Pierce to erase my name from his life completely. I leaned forward and instructed the driver to change the destination. I wasn't going to a cheap motel just yet. I was going to the bank. My only immediate thought was to head straight to the major Chase Bank branch Midtown and close the dormant business bank account I had opened years ago when I first started coding my algorithm. It was the only financial thread left with my name on it, and I wanted it gone before the sun went down. The Uber pulled up to the curb outside the massive glass facade of the bank in Midtown Manhattan. I thanked the driver, mechanically stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, and held my cardboard box tightly against my chest. The heavy glass doors of the bank slid open with a soft mechanical hum, welcoming me into a sterile environment of polished white marble soaring ceilings and hushed corporate conversations. The contrast between my shattered personal life and this calm professional financial space was incredibly jarring. I walked over to the reception desk, my worn sneakers squeaking slightly on the pristine floor. A young woman in a tailored navy suit looked up with a polite, practiced corporate smile, asking how she could assist me today. I looked her in the eye and told her the simplest truth I had left: I need to permanently close a business account. It was a simple request, but the words tasted heavy and bitter on my tongue. It felt like the final official admission that my tech dreams were dead and that Pierce had been right about me all along. She asked me to take a seat in the premier waiting area, pointing toward a row of expensive leather chairs. I sat down, placing my cardboard box on the empty seat next to me, staring at the geometric patterns on the carpet. I tried to keep my mind completely blank, fighting the searing pain of betrayal. If I allowed myself to think about Pierce and Chloe in my house right now, decorating a nursery, while I sat here with $400 to my name, I knew I would completely fall apart. I needed to focus entirely on the logistics. Closing this account was an administrative necessity. It was an old dormant account I had opened 4 years ago when I first registered the LLC for my algorithm. Pierce had insisted we open it at a completely separate branch to keep my hobby money separate from our real family finances. The account had not seen a single deposit or withdrawal in over 3 years. I just needed to drain whatever pennies were left in it, sign the closure forms, and officially erase Pierce's orbit from my financial existence. Sitting in the quiet lobby, I remembered the exact day we had opened it. Pierce had worn his favorite Navy Tom Ford suit, treating the whole endeavor like a cute little project I was playing at to feel important. I remembered the intense heat rising in my cheeks as he belittled my ambitions to the teller. But I had swallowed my pride, forced a smile, and signed the paperwork. Now, I was about to close that dark chapter forever. A thick mahogany door opened down the hall, and a tall man with thinning gray hair and an expensive watch stepped out into the lobby. He wore a gold name tag that identified him as Mr. Vance, the branch vice president. He called my name, and I stood up, grabbing my box with sweaty palms, ready to end it. Mr. Vance guided me into his private glass-walled office with a smooth, practiced corporate grace that felt entirely alien to the raw, jagged edges of my current reality. The office smelled of expensive mahogany-rich leather upholstery and the subtle, sharp scent of fresh espresso. He gestured toward a plush, charcoal-colored leather chair facing his heavy executive desk, and I sat down carefully, placing my battered cardboard box on the immaculate floor beside my feet. The contrast was absolutely ridiculous, a broke woman clutching her life in a cardboard box sitting across from a high-level Manhattan wealth manager. "How can we help you today, Mrs. Vance?" he asked, misreading the name on the old joint records. "It's Valerie, actually, and I am here to close the commercial account for V-Logix Tech, LLC. I said, my voice completely flat and direct. I pulled out my scratched MIT laptop, my government ID, and the original corporate registration documents from the bottom of my box, sliding them across the dark wood desk. "The account has been dormant for a very long time. I just want to drain whatever residual balance is left inside it, sign the final closure forms, and terminate our relationship with Chase Bank permanently." Mr. Vance offered a polite professional nod, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses as he pulled up the corporate profile on his dual monitor system. He began typing slowly, his manicured fingers clicking rhythmically against the mechanical keyboard. For the first few seconds, his expression was completely neutral, the standard, bored face of a seasoned banking executive handling a routine administrative task on a Tuesday afternoon. Then the clicking stopped entirely. The silence in the office became deafening. I watched as the color literally drained from Mr. Vance's face, leaving him a stark, sickly shade of pale ivory. His posture, which had been relaxed and confident, went completely rigid. He leaned forward, his eyes widening behind his glasses as he stared intently at the monitor, blinking rapidly as if he were looking at a ghost. He looked at the screen, then looked up at me, then looked back at the screen, his mouth opening slightly but producing absolutely no sound. "Is there an issue, Mr. Vance?" I asked, a sudden knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Great, I thought bitterly. Pierce probably found this account too, and managed to overdraw it just to spite me further. "Ma'am?" Mr. Vance whispered, his voice cracking slightly as he cleared his throat, completely losing his polished corporate composure. He gripped the edge of his desk, his eyes darting toward the closed glass door, as if he were afraid someone might be looking in. "Valerie, have you looked at the current balance on this specific entity account any time within the last 24 hours? "No," I replied, my brow furrowing in deep confusion. "Like I said, the company failed. It has been completely dormant for over 3 years. There shouldn't be more than a few $100s of leftover beta testing fees in there, if that." Mr. Vance slowly turned one of his massive monitors around, facing it directly toward me. "I think you need to look at this, ma'am." I leaned forward, my eyes scanning past the corporate name, past the routing number, straight to the bottom right corner, where the current available balance was displayed in a bold black font. $65,432,109.88. I sat entirely frozen, my brain flatly refusing to process the visual data on the screen. I blinked once, twice. The numbers didn't change. $65,432,109.88. This has to be a catastrophic system glitch, I said, my voice coming out as a breathless, trembling whisper. That is completely impossible. My software never made a profit. We never had clients. There is absolutely no way that money belongs to me. Mr. Vance shook his head rapidly, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he pulled up the transaction ledger. It is not a glitch, Valerie. These are completely cleared, fully liquidated federal wire transfers. Look here. Over the last 48 hours, an automated sequence of massive institutional deposits has been hitting this account. Every single one of them originates from the United States Department of Defense, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and Global Horizon Logistics. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Global Horizon. That was the largest defense and civilian logistics conglomerate in North America. I don't understand, I stammered, my hand shaking uncontrollably as I stared at the ledger. 3 years ago, you integrated your predictive supply chain algorithm into an open-source global beta network, correct? Mr. Vance asked, reading from the corporate file notes. When the global shipping corridors collapsed last year due to the maritime crises and the cyber attacks on domestic rail lines, the federal government and Global Horizon quietly acquired the operational rights to use the open-source architecture of your vLogic system to reroute military and civilian food supplies. Because you held the exclusive underlying utility patents under this specific LLC, the automated royalty per container contract kicked in nationwide. You didn't fail, Valerie. Your system became the backbone of national infrastructure while you weren't looking. The realization washed over me like a tidal wave of pure adrenaline, instantly incinerating the residual fog of depression, heartbreak, and self-doubt that had plagued me for years. My algorithm hadn't failed. It had worked so perfectly, so quietly, and on such a massive scale that it had been absorbed into the highest levels of global commerce and national security, while Pierce was busy telling me I was a useless dropout. Because I had built the entire system myself, without a single dollar of venture capital funding, I owned 100% of the equity. I didn't just have money. I had absolute unassailable financial power. A cold, sharp smile slowly spread across my face, a stark contrast to the broken woman who had walked into this bank 15 minutes ago. I looked at the cardboard box on the floor, then looked back at Mr. Vance, whose attitude had completely shifted from polite condescension to absolute reverence. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice dropping into a low, commanding register that surprised even myself. "We are no longer closing this account. In fact, we are doing the exact opposite. I need to initiate an immediate high-stakes liquidation of assets, and I need it done before the close of the business day. Anything you need, Valerie. Our elite private banking division is entirely at your disposal," he said, sat up perfectly straight, practically tripping over himself to be of service. "First, I want this account flagged with maximum security protocol," I commanded. "Biometric access only. If my ex-husband, Pierce Vance, or anyone from the Sterling Family Trust attempts to run a credit check or request an asset search on my name, I want a hard legal firewall deployed instantly. They think I have $400 to my name. I want them to keep believing that until the trap snaps shut." "Consider it done," Mr. Vance replied, his fingers typing furiously to apply the high-level security clearance blocks. "What is our next move? Now let's talk about retaliatory acquisitions," I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on his mahogany desk. "My ex-husband's hedge fund, Apex Capital Solutions, operates out of a luxury commercial building downtown. They have been struggling with liquidity over the past 2 quarters, correct?" Mr. Vance's eyes lit up with professional intrigue as he quickly brought up a market analysis terminal. "Yes, they are highly leveraged, Valerie. In fact, according to our internal credit data, they are currently seeking a $25 million emergency cash infusion to avoid a technical default on their primary commercial credit line next Monday." "How did you know that?" "Oh, because Pierce talks in his sleep when he's terrified of losing his status," I said coldly. "I want you to use $25 million from my account to quietly purchase that distressed credit line from their primary lender through an anonymous offshore shell corporation. By tomorrow morning, I don't want Chase Bank holding his debt. I want me holding his debt." I want to become my ex-husband's sole corporate landlord and primary creditor. Saji sant honest to me. Mr. Vance let out a low, impressed whistle, a genuine grin breaking through his corporate facade. That is an incredibly aggressive, brilliant play. If you buy that debt, you can legally call the loan due at any time if they violate a single operational covenant. Exactly, I said, my eyes narrowing with calculated precision. And knowing Pierce, he has already violated several. But we aren't stopping there. My mother, Eleanor Sterling, relies entirely on the dividend payouts from the Sterling Family Real Estate Trust to maintain her lifestyle and pay the maintenance fees on that Upper East Side penthouse she just kicked me out of. Who manages that trust? Mr. Vance checked the financial network databases, his eyes widening further. It's actually managed by a subsidiary firm that we just acquired last quarter. Valerie, you have enough liquid cash right now to buy out the controlling voting shares of that specific management trust entirely. Then do it, I ordered, without a single second of hesitation. Acquire the controlling stake. By 5 o'clock today, I want to own the management company that controls my mother's housing and income. I want the power to audit her expenses, freeze her distributions for suspicious activity, and evict anyone living in that penthouse with a 30-day legal notice. It will require a massive coordination of wire transfers, legal filings, and rapid market executions. But given your current cleared cash balance, we can absolutely pull this off before Wall Street closes for the day. Mr. Vance said, his face flushed with the excitement of executing a multi-million-dollar corporate ambush. Perfect, I said, standing up from the leather chair. I looked down at my old scratched MIT laptop inside the cardboard box. It was no longer a symbol of my failure. It was the ultimate weapon of my resurrection. They wanted to throw me out like garbage because they thought I was nothing without their wealth. Now, I am going to show them exactly what happens when you underestimate the person who built the system you rely on to survive. Let's begin the liquidation. While the private banking division at Chase Bank was busy routing millions of dollars across global financial networks to execute my corporate ambush, I remained in Mr. Vance's glass-walled office. My mind was racing, fire-corrupted and hyper-focused. The initial shock of the $65 million had settled into something far more dangerous: cold analytical calculation. I sat with my MIT laptop resting on my knees, typing commands directly into my secure terminal to review the VLogix source code repositories. Something still wasn't adding up. If my algorithm had been integrated into national infrastructure, someone on the outside had to have facilitated the bridge between my open-source beta network and the Department of Defense. Valerie, Mr. Vance said, interrupting my thoughts as he stared intently at his dual monitor system. His brow furrowed deeply, the pale color returning to his face, but now accompanied by an expression of extreme professional anxiety. We have hit a massive high-security compliance flag in the transaction ledger. I need you to look at this immediately. I set my laptop aside, leaning over his desk to examine the glowing green and white rows of financial data. What kind of flag? Look at the corporate history of the VLogix account before the federal deposits cleared, Mr. Vance explained, pointing a trembling finger at an obscure nested tab within the secure banking portal. 4 years ago, right after you opened this account, an electronic mandate was filed to link this entity to an external holding company registered in Dover, Delaware. The company is called Aegis Logistics Systems. The name hit me like an electric shock. Aegis Logistics Systems. It wasn't a name I had ever heard before yet. It was deeply intertwined with my proprietary code. According to the banking ledgers, Mr. Vance continued, his voice dropping to a cautious whisper, Aegis Logistics Systems has been collecting a massive, quiet stream of quarterly licensing fees from Vanguard Nexus, the commercial shipping titan, for the past 48 months. Millions of dollars were routed through Aegis using your exact VLogix algorithm as the underlying licensed asset. But look at the routing path. Yesterday morning, Vanguard Nexus initiated a total corporate buyout to acquire the intellectual property permanently for $65 million. But instead of sending the funds to Aegis, their legal team abruptly bypassed the holding company and wired the money directly to your dormant account here. Why would they bypass the holding company if it held the license? I asked, my blood running cold as the pieces of a massive dark puzzle began to align in my head. Because Vanguard Nexus's forensic accounting and due diligence teams flagged a felony, a crisp, authoritative male voice boomed from the executive speakerphone on Mr. Vance's desk. It was Marcus, the head of global asset due diligence and legal compliance for Vanguard Nexus, whom Mr. Vance had immediately patched into the secure line. Am I speaking with Valerie Sterling, the sole original creator of the V-Logics framework? Yes, this is Valerie, I replied, my grip tightening on the edge of the desk. Marcus, please tell me exactly what your team found. Valerie. 2 months ago, our executive board decided to fully acquire the V-Logics algorithm to integrate it permanently into our new global automated shipping hardware. Marcus explained, his tone clinical and sharp, like a surgeon delivering a terminal diagnosis. When we began auditing the original chain of title and ownership transfer documents submitted by Aegis Logistics Systems, our legal team utilized advanced forensic verification software to scrutinize the signatures. We discovered that the document transferring the exclusive licensing rights from you to Aegis was a complete fabrication. Your signature had been traced and digitally forged. My breath caught in my throat. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Who is the managing director of Aegis Logistics Systems, Marcus? The sole signatory and beneficial owner listed on the Delaware Corporate Registry for Aegis Logistics Systems, Marcus articulated every single syllable with devastating precision, is your husband, Pierce Vance. The silence that followed inside the bank manager's office was absolute heavy with the weight of a horrific multi-year betrayal. The sheer scale of Pierce's sociopathic manipulation washed over me, making it difficult to draw oxygen into my lungs. He hadn't just cheated on me with my younger sister. He hadn't just thrown me out of our home. He had systematically stolen the crown jewel of my intellect, my life's work, and had been cashing multi-million-dollar royalty checks behind my back, while watching me drown in a manufactured ocean of self-doubt and despair. Valerie, are you still there? Marcus's voice echoed over the speakerphone, breaking through the ringing in my ears. I'm here, I whispered, my voice sounding hollow, detached, and chillingly calm. Please tell me the rest. When our forensic team confirmed the forgery, we realized that if we paid Aegis Logistics Systems, the $65 million buyout Vanguard Nexus would be opening itself up to a catastrophic multi-billion-dollar copyright and patent infringement lawsuit from you, the actual creator, Marcus explained. We knew Pierce Vance was trying to execute a fraudulent liquidation before you discovered the theft, so our corporate lawyers bypassed him entirely. We tracked down the original utility patent filing, located your active business bank account tied to V-Logics, and wired the entire $65 million directly to you to secure the clean legal rights. Legally speaking, Pierce has absolutely nothing. His holding company is an empty shell. Come geek. And Pierce has no idea. I asked, a dark, dangerous satisfaction beginning to bloom beneath my anger. None whatsoever, Marcus said with a cold corporate chuckle. As far as he knows, the wire was scheduled to hit his Aegis account at noon today. He is likely sitting in his office right now, believing he has successfully pulled off the perfect crime, stolen your fortune, and successfully cast you out with $400. Memories suddenly flooded my mind like a violent, rushing waterfall of deception. I remembered every single night over the past 3 years that Pierce had walked down to my small workspace. He would stand directly over my shoulder, feigning a warm, supportive interest in my progress, asking detailed questions about how the back-end neural networks and API integrations worked. He had offered to handle the boring corporate paperwork, the initial patent filings, and the open-source licensing agreements, claiming he wanted to protect his brilliant wife from the stress of the business world so I could focus entirely on my creative coding. I had trusted him implicitly. I had handed him the very digital keys and documentation he needed to build his secret empire. But the theft of the code wasn't even the most sadistic part of his plan. The absolute worst part was the systematic psychological warfare he had waged against me to keep me compliant. I vividly remembered sitting on the freezing tile floor of our bathroom, weeping in absolute despair because my algorithm's public launch had garnered zero commercial interest. Pierce would sit right next to me, gently rubbing my back, putting on a masterclass performance of the loving, protective husband. He would whisper that the tech market was just too brutal, that my ideas were far too academic, and that I shouldn't feel bad about failing because he would always be there to provide for me. He had deliberately weaponized my perceived failure to completely control my existence. He used it to justify his condescending remarks, his financial abuse, and his constant demands that I play the role of the subservient, grateful wife who owed him her lifestyle. My mother had eagerly joined in the chorus, mocking my ambition at every family dinner, telling everyone in our elite Manhattan social circle that I was a lost cause who played with computers while Pierce carried the weight of the family. They had formed a unified front of systemic gaslighting, making me believe I was fundamentally worthless while Pierce was literally cashing checks generated entirely by my own brilliance. He had watched me stress over basic grocery bills and eat cheap takeout while he sat on a hidden fortune built on my back. "Valerie," Mr. Vance said softly, his eyes wide with a mixture of profound shock and deep respect as he looked up from his computer screen. "The legal filings have just cleared. The anonymous corporate entities funded by your account have officially purchased Pierce's hedge fund debt. You are now the primary creditor of Apex Capital Solutions. Furthermore, the voting shares for the Sterling Family Real Estate Trust have been transferred. You officially control the management company of your mother's penthouse." I stood up from the plush leather chair, my posture perfectly rigid, my eyes flashing with a cold, unyielding fire. The broken, discarded wife who had walked into this bank an hour ago was completely dead. In her place stood a multi-millionaire tech titan who now held the financial throat of every single person who had ever sought to break her. "Marcus," I said into the speakerphone, my voice steady and deadly, "thank you for the due diligence. Keep your launch schedule for the automated shipping platform. The rights are completely yours." "Thank you, Valerie. It's an honor to do business with the real genius behind the system," Marcus said before disconnecting the line. I turned to Mr. Vance, grabbing my battered cardboard box, which now felt as light as a feather. "It's time to close the trap, Mr. Vance. Let's head to Upper East Side. I believe my ex-husband and my family are currently celebrating a fortune that doesn't exist." The elevator ride up to the penthouse of the pre-war building on Park Avenue was the longest 90 seconds of my life. I stood inside the wood-paneled cab, clutching my worn cardboard box against my ribs like a shield. Beside me stood Mr. Vance, along with two high-ranking corporate attorneys from Chase Bank's Elite Asset Protection Division and a private security detail. The lawyers carried sleek leather briefcases containing the freshly stamped, legally binding emergency injunctions and debt acquisition papers that had cleared the state registry less than 30 minutes prior. When the elevator doors slid open directly into the private foyer of the penthouse, the sound of clinking crystal and boisterous laughter immediately spilled out across the polished herringbone floors. I paused for a fraction of a second, taking a deep, stabilizing breath. They were celebrating. The air in the apartment was heavy, with the rich, indulgent scent of a high-end catered dinner. I walked down the short gallery hall and stepped into the sprawling double-height living room. The scene before me was a grotesque caricature of old money triumph. My mother, Eleanor, was sitting on the custom velvet sectional I had spent months sourcing, raising a crystal flute of vintage Dom Perignon to the ceiling. Pierce stood beside her, his arms still wrapped tightly around Chloe's waist. He looked completely untethered by guilt. His chest puffed out beneath his tailored suit. A pristine white smile plastered across his face. Chloe was giggling, holding a glossy luxury real estate brochure for a multi-million-dollar estate in the Hamptons. On the marble kitchen island sat a large catering platter of caviar and oysters, surrounded by expensive unopened shopping bags from Chanel and Bergdorf Goodman. They had already spent money they didn't have. They were celebrating the $65 million buyout, completely oblivious to the fact that the financial ground beneath their feet had already turned to quicksand. "Oh, look what the wind blew back in," Chloe mocked, her voice dripping with immediate theatrical disgust as she noticed me standing by the archway. She dropped the real estate brochure onto the table and crossed her arms. "Did the $400 motel room in Queens reject you, Valerie? Or did you just come back to beg Pierce for an allowance? Honestly, your timing is pathetic. We're in the middle of a private family toast, and your broke, bitter energy is genuinely ruining the vibe." Pierce turned his head, a look of profound annoyance crossing his handsome features as he looked at me and the group of suited professionals standing behind me. He set his champagne glass down on the counter with a sharp click. "Valerie, I thought I made myself entirely clear an hour ago. Pierce said, his voice dropping into that familiar, condescending Wall Street register he always used to make me feel small. "You signed the unconditional divorce papers. You handed over the keys. You have absolutely no legal right to be in this building anymore. If you are here to throw a desperate tantrum over the spousal support waiver, save your breath. My lawyers will have you arrested for trespassing before you can even open your mouth. Leave now." My mother Eleanor didn't even stand up from the sofa. She merely swirled the champagne in her glass, looking at me with a mixture of cold pity and intense irritation. "Valerie, stop making an absolute spectacle of yourself. It is embarrassing. Pierce has been incredibly generous by letting you walk away without suing you for the money he wasted on your failed tech hobbies. Go find a cheap apartment, get a mundane data entry job, and try to rebuild whatever is left of your life quietly. Do not ruin your sister's special day." I didn't say a word. I simply walked forward, my sneakers silent on the expensive rugs, and placed my battered cardboard box directly onto the pristine marble kitchen island right next to their expensive catering platter. I looked at the three of them, recording every single detail of their smug, arrogant faces. "You're right about one thing, Pierce," I said, my voice eerily calm, smooth, and entirely devoid of the trembling weakness they expected. "A massive financial liquidation took place in Manhattan this afternoon. A life-changing amount of money shifted hands. But before we discuss where I'm going to live, I think you should check your secure commercial accounts for Aegis Logistics Systems. Go ahead, Pierce. Open your phone. Pull up the wire transfer ledger. Let's see how much that stolen algorithm of mine just made you." Pierce's eyes narrow at a flash of genuine irritation crossing his face. "You really are losing your mind, aren't you? You think you understand high finance because you know how to type code in a closet." He pulled his iPhone from his pocket with a dramatic, arrogant flourish, tapping the screen aggressively. "Fine. I will gladly show you the exact numbers of my success just to humiliate you one last time before the security guards drag you out of here." Chloe leaned over his shoulder, a smug smirk plastered across her face, waiting to watch me break. My mother watched from the sofa, a look of bored superiority on her face. I watched Pierce's fingers move across the screen as he logged into the secure treasury portal for Aegis Logistics Systems, the Delaware shell company he had used to steal my life's work. For the first 5 seconds, his expression was entirely confident, then his thumb froze. The smug smirk on Pierce's face didn't just fade, it disintegrated. His jaw went completely slack, and his eyes widened to a terrifying degree as he stared at the digital display. He blinked rapidly, his breathing suddenly becoming shallow and ragged. He began tapping the screen frantically, refreshing the page over and over again, his manicured hands beginning to visibly shake. What is this? "This is impossible," Pierce stammered, his voice losing all its Wall Street authority, cracking into a high-pitched, desperate whine. "There's an administrative error. The wire from Vanguard Nexus is gone. It's not pending. The entire corporate account has been flagged for federal compliance review. The current balance is 0. "What do you mean it's 0, Pierce?" Chloe snapped, her voice instantly losing its sweet, innocent tone, turning sharp and panicked. She grabbed his arm, staring at the phone screen. "That's impossible. We just put a non-refundable deposit on the Hamptons estate. The wire was supposed to clear at noon." "It didn't clear, Chloe," I said, leaning against the kitchen island, crossing my arms as I watched the panic begin to consume them. "And it never will. Do you want to tell him what happened, Mr. Vance?" Mr. Vance stepped forward from the shadow of the archway, adjusting his gold glasses as he pulled a certified legal document from his leather briefcase. He looked at Pierce with absolute corporate coldness. "Mr. Vance is the Regional Vice President of Chase Bank. I am here to formally inform you that Vanguard Nexus's global forensic legal team conducted a rigorous audit of the intellectual property transfer documents for V-Logix Tech LLC." Mr. Vance announced, his voice echoing with absolute authority through the double-height room. "They utilized digital handwriting analysis and forensic verification software on the contracts you submitted under Aegis Logistics Systems. They discovered that you clumsily forged your ex-wife's signature to illegally transfer her utility patents into your shell company." Pierce's phone slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering loudly against the marble counter. He staggered back a step, his face a terrifying, sickly shade of gray. "Because you committed a felony, Pierce." I took over, my voice cutting through the room like a razor blade. "Vanguard Nexus immediately terminated all communication and contracts with your fraudulent shell company. To protect themselves from a catastrophic multi-billion-dollar lawsuit from me, the actual creator, their corporate board, completely bypassed you. They tracked down my original business account, verified my identity, and wired the entire $65 million buyout directly to me. I am the sole owner of the fortune you are currently celebrating. Every single dollar of it belongs to me." No, that's not legally possible," Pierce screamed, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal, his chest heaving as a full-scale panic attack began to seize his lungs. "I controlled the LLC. I managed the filings. You're an MIT dropout. You're nothing without me." "She is a multimillionaire, Mr. Vance." Chase Bank's lead asset attorney stepped forward, sliding a stack of heavy stamped legal notices across the marble counter, right over the real estate brochures. "And as of 3 o'clock this afternoon, she is also your absolute worst nightmare. Valerie Sterling has just utilized her liquid capital to completely purchase the distressed $25 million commercial credit line of your hedge fund, Apex Capital Solutions, from your primary lender. You are in technical default on 3 separate operational covenants as of this morning. Valerie is now your sole primary creditor, and she is calling the entire $25 million loan due immediately." You can't do that," Pierce whispered, collapsing against the edge of the sofa, his hands covering his face as his entire professional existence dissolved into thin air. "If you call that loan, the fund will default by tomorrow morning. I'll be completely ruined. I'll lose my license. I'll face federal prison for the forgery." "You should have thought about that before you stole my code and treated me like garbage in my own home," I said coldly, turning my gaze away from his pathetic broken form. I looked over at my mother and my sister, who were standing frozen in absolute paralyzed horror. "But don't worry, Pierce. You won't be the only one moving into a motel room tomorrow. We still need to discuss the real estate." The heavy silence that blanketed the penthouse was broken only by the sound of Pierce's ragged, shallow breathing as he sat collapsed on the velvet sectional. The celebratory atmosphere had completely vanished, replaced by the suffocating weight of absolute financial ruin. Chloe stood completely paralyzed, her hands hovering over her stomach, staring at the legal documents on the counter as if they were a countdown timer on an explosive device. My mother, Eleanor, finally stood up from the sofa. The pristine, elegant composure she had spent a lifetime cultivating was beginning to crack at the seams. Her eyes darted from the Chase Bank attorneys to Mr. Vance, and then finally settled on me. A forced, tight smile stretched across her face, a desperate, manipulative attempt to invoke the maternal bond she had so casually discarded less than 2 hours ago. "Valerie, darling," Eleanor said, her voice dropping into a soft, placating tone that made my skin crawl. She took a step toward me, extending her hands in a grand gesture of family unity. "Let's all just take a deep breath. This has clearly been a massive, unfortunate misunderstanding. Pierce was completely wrong for what he did to your business and Chloe. Well, Chloe is young and foolish, but we are a family, Valerie. Blood is thicker than water. Surely you wouldn't use your success to destroy your own mother and sister over a silly marital dispute." I looked at her, my expression completely unreadable, completely immune to her sudden display of affection. "Blood didn't stop you from throwing me out of this apartment like literal garbage an hour ago, Eleanor. Blood didn't stop you from signing off on a divorce that would have left me on a Greyhound bus to Queens with $400 in my pocket, while my husband and sister lived in my home." "Valerie, I was only doing what I thought was best to avoid a public scandal," Eleanor protested, her voice rising in pitch as she realized her manipulation wasn't working. She gestured wildly around the double-height room. "This penthouse is a sterling family legacy. I raised you here. You cannot possibly mean to interfere with my home." "This penthouse isn't a family legacy, Eleanor," I said, my voice cutting through her excuses with surgical precision. "It is an asset held entirely by the Sterling Family Real Estate Trust, and as your expensive lifestyle dictated, you haven't actually owned the building management company that controls this trust in over a decade. You rely entirely on the quarterly dividend distributions to pay the $30,000 monthly maintenance and amenity fees for this specific unit. I turned my head slightly, nodding toward the lead asset protection attorney. Go ahead, Harrison. Read the final execution filing. Harrison stepped forward, opening a sleek black leather folder and pulling out a certified document bearing the official seal of the New York State Division of Corporations. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, Harrison announced in a clear, booming voice that echoed off the minimalist concrete accent walls. As of precisely 3:45 p.m. today, V-Logix Holdings, LLC, has successfully completed the market acquisition of a 92% controlling voting interest in the Sterling Family Real Estate Trust Management subsidiary. Your daughter, Valerie, is now the sole managing director of the entity that dictates your income and housing. Eleanor staggered backward, her hand flying to her chest, her face turning an identical shade of gray to Pierce's. You bought the trust management company. I did, I said, leaning forward against the marble kitchen island. And as my first official administrative act as managing director, I have ordered an immediate comprehensive forensic audit of all corporate distributions made to you over the past 5 years. We have already flagged over $2 million in unauthorized personal expenses that you charge directly to the trust's commercial maintenance accounts, including Chloe's European modeling trips and Pierce's country club memberships. That is standard accounting flexibility, Eleanor yelled, her upper lip trembling with pure terror. That is corporate embezzlement, Eleanor, I corrected her coldly. And under the strict operational bylaws of the trust, any beneficiary found committing a material fraud against the asset pool is subject to an immediate permanent freeze on all dividend distributions effective instantly. Chloe let out a sharp, hysterical gasp, dropping her Chanel shopping bags onto the floor. You're freezing Mom's money, Valerie. You can't do that. How are we supposed to pay for the Hamptons estate? How am I supposed to pay for the nursery? I'm pregnant. Then I suggest you and Pierce find a way to finance your lives on your own merits, Chloe, I said, looking at my younger sister with absolute indifference. Because as of this exact second, the Sterling family bank accounts are completely locked. The black Amex cards in your designer purses are officially deactivated. You are entirely cut off from my wealth. Valerie, please, Chloe cried, stepping forward, tears finally spilling over her mascara-laden eyelashes as the reality of her broken future set in. I'm sorry, Pierce lied to me too. He told me he was the genius behind the code. He told me he was going to buy me the world. Don't do this to your own sister. You wanted my life, Chloe, I whispered, looking around the pristine penthouse I had spent 5 years decorating for a man who never loved me. Now you have it. You have a bankrupt husband, a massive mountain of federal fraud lawsuits, and absolutely nowhere to live. I turned back to Harrison, my voice turning to steel. Serve the final notice. Harrison pulled a bright red, certified legal document from his folder and placed it squarely on top of the Chanel bags at Chloe's feet. This is an official 30-day emergency eviction mandate for Unit 14B, Harrison stated professionally. Due to the immediate freeze on the trust's maintenance accounts, this unit is being permanently liquidated from the commercial portfolio to cover the outstanding corporate debts. You have exactly 30 days from tomorrow morning to pack your remaining personal belongings and vacate the premises. If you are still inside this penthouse on the 31st day, the New York City Marshal's Office will execute a physical removal. Eleanor collapsed back onto the sofa, her hands shaking so violently she dropped her crystal champagne flute. The vintage Dom Perignon spilled across the custom charcoal carpet, staining the fabric in a slow-spreading puddle of ruin. She stared at me, her mouth moving soundlessly, completely broken by the daughter she had spent 29 years undermining. I reached down, picked up my battered cardboard box containing my scratched MIT laptop, and looked at the three of them one final time. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, destroyed by the very arrogance and greed they had used as weapons against me. 30 days, Eleanor, I said quietly, turning my back on my toxic family forever. Make sure you pack your boxes carefully. I hear the motels in Queens fill up incredibly fast. I walked down the gallery hall, stepped into the private elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, sealing them inside their crumbling empire, I smiled. The system had worked perfectly.